Good morning. Welcome. What's the secret or the way to increase your worth, to be worth more than you are now? And of course, we're going to look at the Parsha and see what did Yitzchok do and what happened to Yitzchok that increased his wealth exponentially, not just a lot more, but 100% more. What's the story? Yitzchok was living in Israel, as we know. He never left Israel, and there was a hunger, a famine. However, in Egypt, there was food. And Yitzchok felt that perhaps he should do exactly what his father did and make his way down to Egypt to get food, to survive this hunger. Now, we know that when Avram went down to Egypt, it was very challenging. They abducted Sarah. They took her to F.R.E.E. It wasn't so simple. Yitzchok, however, was planning to do the same thing because he has to eat, he has to survive. A person is not supposed to rely on miracles. A person is supposed to do whatever they can with the natural means and the tools that we have at our disposal, and Hashem does the rest. However, Hashem appeared to Yitzchok and he said, not you. You are not supposed to go down to Egypt. You are not supposed to leave Eretz Yisrael. You were placed on the altar when Avram Avinu was told to bring you as an offering, which was the greatest test. And I told him not to at the last second, but nonetheless, you're considered to be an Oila Tamima, which means a complete Oila offering. And therefore, you don't leave Israel. You have this certain holiness to you. You stay right here. Okay? And somehow, miraculously, that year, Yitzchok, who was involved in cultivating wheat and produce, he was planting, he had many fields. Somehow, that year, says the Torah, his fields and his efforts produced 100 times as more, 100 gates. Hashem blessed him, says the Torah. And 100 gates means that it produced 100 times more than they anticipated. Even though it was a tough year, it was a famine, and it was tough land. The earth, certain parts of the earth are very good for planting, certain parts are very good for producing, and this particular area that Yitzchok was planting was not good land. Nonetheless, it still produced very well. Now, it's a double miracle because when you have a tough year, you can have the best real estate, the best land, you can have a lot of good things, but it's not a good year. There's a famine, there's not enough rain, whatever it is, it's not going to produce what you wanted to produce. And then you could have a good year, but if the land is not right, then it's not going to produce. And here you had both problems together, both minuses, meaning all the cards were stacked against him. You're not going to be able to be successful here. You're not going to be able to produce. You're wasting your time. But he did what Hashem said. He stayed in Israel. He did his part. And it produced tremendously. Now, Rashi tells us on this concept of two explanations on this concept of Mea Sha'arim, of 100 gates. When the Torah says he produced 100, what does 100 mean? So one explanation that Rashi tells us is that they estimated, if I plant this amount of seeds in this area of land, okay, it's going to produce an X amount. Whenever you estimate where you're going to plant, how much space, how much you're going to use, what you're going to do, and so on, you have a certain projection of what you think it's going to give you. And Yitzchok's fields gave him 100 times more than they anticipated. It wasn't a 10% increase, a 20% increase. It was 100% increase, which is phenomenal. The second explanation is it wasn't just a projection of how much produce we're going to have this year, but they made an estimation of how much Maaser, how much tithing they have to give. We have a mitzvah in the Torah. We have a commandment that you should give 10% of your earnings to charity. 10% of your earnings give away to the needy. Now, in the times of the temple, the times of the Beis Hamikdash, and indeed even today in Israel, there's certain types of Maaser that you have to give, certain tithings and certain parts or percentages, depending on the year, of your produce goes to the Kohen, or it goes to the Levi, it goes to the poor, and so on and so forth. But without getting into all that, today, a person is, and before the temple was built, a person is required to give 10%, really before we moved into Israel, a person is required to give 10% of his earnings to charity. So Yitzchok, as he's planning his produce, he's sitting down and he's calculating, if I'm going to have this amount of square meters of planted land, it's going to produce an X amount, and therefore I'm going to have to give a certain amount of charity, 10%. He figured it out. And somehow, when it came down to actually doing it, he's like, 1 second, I have 100 times more than I anticipated. So he wants to give, let's just say, $100 worth because his field produced $1,000 worth. And when he got there, it was 100 times more. Now, this second explanation obviously is a supernatural miracle. That somehow, it's not a little bit of an increase. You were off by a few percentages. It was a really good year, higher than projections. It was completely off the charts. It was 100% increase, which is phenomenal. Now, if you told me that we did a little bit better than before, or we did, despite the fact that it was a bad year, despite the fact that it was bad land, nonetheless it did good, but it means that in a regular year, this is what it would have produced. We just were shooting lower or projecting lower because it was a bad year, because it was a bad land. So we assumed it was less. It turns out, miraculously, it was more, or it wasn't less. Okay, that's wonderful. However, it's not as great of a miracle as when you say we anticipated X and we got 100% more. And this is really what Torah is telling you. How did Yitzchok have all of the wealth, all of the worth, and the tremendous riches that he had? What's the secret? How did he get it? Where did it come from? And that's why our sages, when they talk about it, they allude to the fact about tithing. They say that year he estimated 10%. And that 10% turned out to be wrong projections. It was so wrong, it was 100% off, meaning it grew 100%. To tell you that's why he got the blessing. It's not just he listened to Hashem and didn't go to Egypt. He remained, in Israel. It's all beautiful. But when the sages are explaining to us this element about 10%, they're using that word, they calculated this amount and it turned out to be more. It's to teach you something. It's to teach us the importance, the value, what you're going to get out of giving 10% to charity. There's, generally speaking, we say a person is not allowed to test God. In other words, you can't say, listen, I'm going to start putting on tefillin every day. I'm going to start learning Torah every day. By the way, this is a great channel, a Facebook page to do it at. But I'm going to start learning Torah every day. Now I want to see blessings in my life. I want to see results. I want to see outcomes. You're not allowed to say that. Why? Because you do what you're supposed to do. You don't understand how reward and punishment works. Obviously, Hashem rewards for what's done good. And obviously, Hashem never remains in debt. He always takes care of anyone that he owes to, he will give. And God's goodness is much greater than his discipline, than his punishment. He's going to give tremendously. However, you can't test him. You can't say, I'm going to do this for the reason. If you try to figure these things out, and try to say, I'm going to try, and if I do it, I'll continue, and if it works, etc., all that kind of stuff, you're not allowed to do it. The exception is charity. Torah says, test me. Try me out. Give 10% of your earnings, and you'll see that you will earn a lot more. Now, I'm not saying you're going to earn 100% more, because there's a range that's brought in the Talmud and from our sages that it's somewhere between 10% and 100%. There's a range. Let's not go that far. I mean, it would be nice. But one thing we know for sure is that success will come from giving Maaser, from giving tithing 10% of what you have. And this is something which begins naturally. He starts planting. Yitzchok didn't sit around and say, okay, I'm going to give charity, we'll see what happens. He actually had fields, and he planted, and he estimated, and he knew this was a good year, this was a bad year, this is a good land. He was involved. He was actually doing this stuff. And as a result of his giving 10% and planning to give 10% to charity, all of a sudden Hashem blessed him 100 times over. The lesson is clear, the lesson is obvious. I want to take a moment and just spend a little time to focus on Yitzchok, the verse Avram. You see, Avram was very giving. He was very kind. He was benevolent. He was called Ish HaChesed, the man of kindness. So much so that the attribute, let's call it the angel of kindness, complained to God when Avram came about. When Avram was born, he complained to God and he said, I have no purpose here. I'm all about kindness. I'm the one that's supposed to bring kindness to the world. I'm the one that's supposed to pray to God and beseech him on behalf of kindness and good things in the world. Abraham is doing that. He exudes such kindness. That's how kind he was. Yitzchok, on the other hand, was not exactly like that. He had a different strength, a different path that he took. Yitzchok took a path of discipline, of standing strong, of not bending from your principles. He was firm, okay? And it's opposite from Avram. Remember Yitzchok and Yishmael, the two brothers? And Yishmael was misbehaving, and Sarah wanted to send him away because he was throwing arrows at Yitzchok, and he was a bad influence, idol worship, and other sins. And Avram couldn't bring himself to do it. He's like, come on, let's not be mean. So if you're a disciplinarian person, you say, 1 second, he's being bad. We got to banish him. He's a bad influence. He doesn't deserve it. But if you're really kind, then you say, let's make it work. You try. So Avram was very, very kind. Yitzchok was the disciplined one. Yitzchok was the one that's going to say no. That's going to be firm. Yet Avram was proud of Yitzchok. Avram benefited, if you will, from Yitzchok, which is a tremendous lesson in Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe in F.R.E.E. talks about this, and he says that opposites attract. By nature, we love this that's opposite from us. There's a verse that tells us that cold water, like on an exhausting soul, which means when a person's very, very hot, tired, you're exhausted, cold water really, really gets you. You enjoy it. Okay? Or if you're freezing, you want a hot drink. Why? If you're cold. In other words, the way that nature is, the way that we're wired, we appreciate that which is opposite from us. It's not our strength, but we like it. Another way to maybe understand this is sweet versus sour, spicy versus and so on. But back to what we're talking about. Avram and Yitzchok. Avram is top down. He is giving. He is all about kindness. Yitzchok is about discipline. Let's take it. Let's work it. Let's develop it. Let's mold it. And that's why they work so well together. That's why Avram is so proud of Yitzchok, and Yitzchok connects with Avram. But to summarize, Yitzchok earned 100% more, 100 times more than expected. And the reason is because he was careful about Maaser. He gave tzedakah, he gave charity. And when he did that, he didn't even do it yet. He planned on doing it for this produce. He estimated. He was all in the accounting. He's going to do this. And Hashem blessed him in a tough year, in a tough area, to see not just good enough, not just a little bit higher than projections, but 100% increase. Friends, have a wonderful day. Don't forget to give charity every day. And share this video.